Welcome to the Ultralight Airplane Workshop. I'm Leon. Today we have a slightly different video. We're going to have a time-lapse video. I don't do these very often, but I have a reason for doing it this time. Recently, the hard drive on my computer crashed. Now, normally I back up my files fairly regularly, but it had been a couple months since I did my last backup. So I lost the latest versions of the OpenVSP files of the UWS-4 Ultralight Airplane. So I had to recreate them. And I thought, you know what, I'll just go ahead and record all the process of inputting the UWS-4 into OpenVSP, and we'll make a little time-lapse video of that. This is not going to be an OpenVSP tutorial, and I'm not going to talk during the time-lapse. We'll just have a little bit of music playing. So after I took out all the pauses where I was doing some research and looking at some YouTube videos, it turned out to be about 6 hours of work, but I sped up time in the video, so it only takes about 25 to 30 minutes. So I recreated the whole plane. I did not start with one of the older backups. And I used a specification document that I've been building along the way, specifying things like the wing chord and span and various other aspects of the design. I used that for the basis of recreating the UWS-4. And I made a few changes along the way, a few tweaks here and there. After the end of this time lapse, I'll talk a little bit about some of the changes that I made. So let's get started. let's talk about some of the changes I made to design during this time lapse I was filming. Number one, something I've talked about in the past, is that I've decided to raise the engine up just a little bit. Now right here I'm showing a 59-inch diameter propeller, but I've designed it so it can take up to a 72-inch diameter propeller. And with that 72-inch propeller on there, the tip comes down to right around in here. That will allow me to make the gear just a little bit shorter. I like that. But there's some consequences, and I talked about that before. Raising this engine up will cause me to have to raise the tail up, because as we look at this front view, I'm trying to keep the slipstream from the propeller from impinging on the tail, just to help to reduce drag a little bit. So I had to raise the tail up a little bit, which of course means the end of the booms have to raise. Another change that I made is I made this center section just a little bit narrower. I was concerned that I had made it a little bit too wide to try to fit into a trailer that is 8 feet wide. So I cut a few inches off of the center section on each end of the center section and add them on to this outer panel. So outer panels are just a little bit longer than they were. Another thing I did to save weight and to change the structure a little bit is I changed this area here under the boom and over the wing, right over the flaps area. Now I had gone to quite a bit of effort to try to reduce interference drag under here. And so I had quite a bit of fairing that went into this area here. But that added quite a bit of weight. Now one of the things that kind of turned out to be a good thing about raising this tail up is that it gave me a little bit more room right here above this rear spar. So this boom in this area could be a little bit thicker. Now initially I had planned on doing a steel tubing truss area in here because I really didn't want to try to do a stressed skin boom in this area. It was just going to be too thin because it was down about this high right in here. But since I raised this boom up and I straightened out the top of the boom a little bit because I used to have a kink right in here, I think that now I'm going to go ahead and change this to all aluminum here, get rid of that steel truss tubing, and this will be more stressed skin. But I'm going to have to live with a little bit of interference drag down in this area right in here. But the nice thing about that is it kind of mirrors this effect over here where I did basically the same thing with the aft end of the pod. So we have a little bit of design similarity between here and here. So I kind of like that, just for the aesthetics. Another thing I did is I faired the scoop here, the cooling inlet scoop for the engine. Before, in the time lapse, I'd only done the duct, and the duct curved into the fuselage. So now I've faired this out here on the skin of the airplane. But I do have one little issue you can see here, is that there's kind of a little dimple in here. I can't quite figure out what I've done wrong to have this show up. OpenVSP is putting this little dimple in here, and I'm working on trying to figure out how to remove that, but it's not really an issue right now. I'm going to go ahead and ignore it for now. Another thing that I did that you can't see here, let me get rid of this fuselage and make it a wire shape. So here I've made the pod wireframe, and you can see the duct where it comes in to that inlet in the engine. I'm not showing the engine right now. What I'm showing to help with simulations when I get to that is I've gone ahead and added another duct in here where the engine is going to be, and the duct comes out here past this aft edge and then curls back in again. Let me get rid of the prop and cone here so you can see that. So here you can see that cone then curls back in on itself. What I will do for simulations is when I go to export this model is that I will use this duct and this duct, and I will subtract it from the fuselage, and that will then make an opening that goes all the way through. So this little part here, this gray part, is really just to help me with simulations. It won't be part of the actual airplane. So here's another change that I made. I've modified the structure of the fuselage a little bit. This is still 4130 steel tubing, but I've modified this front section up here. It used to be just a vertical bar that the feet sit straddle. Now the feet actually are contained mostly within this. There used to be a little kink right here in this longeron here, and then I had a complicated structure here to try to keep that from bending out if we ever hit the nose. I got rid of that, so now this longeron is straight. This bar here is now right at the bottom edge of the instrument panel. Let me go ahead and show that real quick. So right here is the instrument panel. This structure back here has changed a little bit, particularly because the engine is higher than it was. So that's pretty much it for the changes between this version, the UWS-4, and the previous version that we had. I'm liking a lot of the change that we've made here. Something that might still change in the future is this little top deck here, this little rollover protection. I may change that to aluminum instead of steel tubing. I haven't figured that part out yet. But that's pretty much it. We now have the UWS-4 back into OpenVSP. I think it's a little bit better than it used to be. So we will proceed with future versions of design updates using Dan Raymer's book, Simplified Aircraft Designer for Homebuilders. And we will continue on with the design of the UWS-4. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on the fuel tank, where to place it, what we'll make it out of, and a couple things we're going to add in there. We're going to add the parachute, because I want to put a parachute on this airplane, so we got to have a place for that. And I want to make sure we have a little bit of room for baggage, so we'll talk about where that will be on the airplane. Okay guys, thanks for watching. See you soon.